There's something different about people who have no idea who Charli D'Amelio is. Maybe it's the way they can sit through an entire dinner without checking their phone once. Maybe it's how they seem genuinely confused when someone mentions the Rizzler or Subway Surfers. Maybe it's that quiet confidence they carry, unbothered by trends they'll never understand. Because living outside the TikTok universe didn't just save them from mindless scrolling. It forged a specific type of psychological resilience that experts are only now beginning to understand. And by the end of this video, you're going to see why disconnection from viral fame created some of the most mentally grounded people alive today. Let's start with something most people get completely wrong. Modern culture insists that staying current with digital trends is essential for social relevance and cultural literacy. But people who exist outside TikTok's gravitational pull prove that theory dead wrong. Picture yourself as someone in their late 20s or beyond, sitting at a coffee shop on a Saturday morning. The barista is maybe 19, and she's talking excitedly to her coworker about someone's latest dance challenge. You catch fragments of the conversation, words like ratio and FYP, and names that sound almost made up. You sip your coffee, completely unbothered by your lack of understanding. There's no FOMO gnawing at you, no urgent need to open an app and catch up. You finish your drink, pick up your book, and walk out into the sunlight, your attention fully intact, your mind quiet and your own. Picture this. It's 2020, and everyone around you is downloading TikTok during lockdown. You're in your 30s, maybe 40s, and your friends are sending you links to videos that won't play because you don't have the app. You watch the first few through a web browser, see 15 seconds of someone lip-syncing, and something inside you just says no. Not with judgment, not with superiority, just a simple recognition that this particular dopamine stream isn't for you. You close the tab and return to whatever you were doing, never thinking about it again. This wasn't resistance. It was discernment. You learned to recognize what deserved your attention and what didn't. Without the algorithm training your taste, you maintained something increasingly rare, self-directed focus. Your brain kept the ability to choose its own inputs, rather than accepting whatever a recommendation engine served up. Psychologists call this executive function, specifically the capacity for attentional control. But for you, it was just Tuesday. Here's what's remarkable. While millions were rewiring their reward systems around unpredictable content feeds, you were preserving neural pathways for sustained attention and deep focus. General Z reports attention spans averaging 8 seconds. They swipe because the algorithm taught them that something better is always one flick away. But you maintained the ability to stay with difficult, unrewarding tasks until completion. This wasn't ignorance. It was cognitive protection. Picture this. It's 2019 and musical. Lie has just become TikTok. The cultural conversation is splitting into two streams, those inside the app and those outside it. You're at a family gathering and your teenage niece tries to show you her favorite creator. You watch politely, smile and hand the phone back. You're not dismissive, but you're also not downloading the app later. That moment marks the beginning of a parallel existence, one where your cultural references diverge completely from a massive segment of the population, and you're somehow fine with that. This wasn't closed-mindedness. It was boundary setting. You learn to exist comfortably in your own cultural ecosystem without feeling obligated to participate in every new platform. The ability to opt out became a form of emotional self-regulation, a recognition that infinite content doesn't mean mandatory consumption. Psychologists call this internal locus of control, the belief that you direct your own experiences rather than external forces controlling you. But for you, it was just protecting your time. Here's what's extraordinary. You developed immunity to FOMO before it became a clinical concern. Today's young adults experience anxiety when they miss trending topics for even a day. They refresh compulsively because absence feels like social death. But you learn that missing entire cultural movements has zero impact on your actual life quality. This wasn't superiority, it was selective participation. Consider the first time you realized you couldn't connect with someone because your cultural vocabularies had completely diverged. Maybe it was a coworker in their early 20s who spoke entirely in references you didn't understand. Maybe it was a family member who couldn't comprehend how you'd never heard of someone with 40 million followers. You felt that small sting of exclusion, that moment of wondering if you'd become obsolete, if your relevance had expired. The feeling sat with you for a day, maybe two. And then you noticed something unexpected. Life continued exactly as before. This wasn't denial. It was perspective calibration. You learned to tolerate social disconnection without catastrophizing it. That temporary discomfort taught you the difference between actual isolation and simply not sharing every reference point with every person you meet. Neuroscientists call this frustration tolerance, the ability to sit with discomfort without immediately seeking relief. But for you, it was just getting older. Here's what's remarkable. While younger generations were developing hypervigilant social awareness, constantly scanning to ensure they weren't missing crucial trends, you were building comfort with being occasionally out of the loop. Kids today experience genuine distress when excluded from group chats or trending conversations. They equate cultural knowledge gaps with social failure. But you discovered that relevance isn't measured in algorithmic awareness. This wasn't disconnection. It was emotional maturity. Picture this. It's a weeknight evening, and you're learning something difficult. Maybe it's a musical instrument, maybe it's woodworking, maybe it's a new language. You're practicing the same scale, the same joint, the same conjugation for the 20th time. There's no one watching. There's no audience. There's no possibility of virality. The act produces nothing shareable, nothing that translates to social currency. You do it anyway, not because it might impress anyone, but because the skill itself has inherent value. Your progress is measured in tactile competence, not likes or views or follower counts. This wasn't productivity performance. It was genuine skill acquisition. You learned to derive satisfaction from improvement itself, rather than from external validation. Without the option to perform your learning process for an audience, you developed intrinsic motivation, the rarest form of human drive. Psychologists call this delayed gratification, the ability to pursue long-term rewards over immediate pleasure. But for you, it was just having hobbies. Here's what's extraordinary. You maintained the capacity to do difficult things that produce no immediate social reward, a capability that's becoming increasingly rare. Young people today document their entire learning process for content. They pursue skills partly for the performance value. But you learn things in complete obscurity. This wasn't elitism. It was authenticity. Picture this. You're on a long train ride, maybe a flight, and your phone battery is dead. You're sitting there with nothing but your thoughts, the passing landscape, the strangers around you. There's no panic, no desperate search for a charging port, no immediate need to fill the silence with content. You watch the world go by, you think about things, you maybe pull out a book or just sit there existing. 2 hours pass, and you arrive at your destination without having consumed a single piece of media. You feel fine, rested even. Your mind had space to wander, to process, to just be. This wasn't digital detox. It was normal existence. You learned to be alone with your thoughts without experiencing it as deprivation. Because you never trained your brain to expect constant stimulation, you maintained access to your default mode network, the mental state where creativity and self-reflection happen. Neuroscientists call this the brain's resting state, where important cognitive processing occurs. But for you, it was just being bored sometimes. Here's what's remarkable. You can still access the mental state that produces original thinking, while others need stimulation every waking moment. General Z reaches for their phone within 3 minutes of any unstimulated moment. They experience boredom as an emergency to be immediately solved. But you retain comfort with mental space. This wasn't discipline, it was preservation of self. Picture this. You're at a concert, a beautiful sunset spot, an incredible meal. You're experiencing it fully, watching it with your actual eyes, tasting it with your full attention. Your phone stays in your pocket, not because you're making some principled stand against technology, but because it genuinely doesn't occur to you that this moment needs to be captured and shared. You're not thinking about how this experience would look to others, what caption you'd write, whether the lighting is good enough. You're just there, fully present, the moment existing only for you and whoever you're with. This wasn't technophobia, it was presence. You learn to have experiences for their intrinsic value rather than their documentation potential. Without the habit of performing your life for an audience, you maintain the ability to be genuinely present in moments without the mediating layer of content creation. Psychologists call this embodied experience, full sensory engagement without cognitive distraction. But for you, it was just living. Here's what's extraordinary. You experience life directly, rather than through the lens of how it will be perceived. Young people today evaluate experiences partly by their content potential. They choose activities based on aesthetic documentation value, but you do things simply because you want to do them. This wasn't superiority, it was unmediated living. Consider a moment when someone younger asked for your opinion on their content, their profile, their personal brand. Maybe it was someone you manage at work, maybe a family member, maybe a friend's kid. They showed you their carefully constructed feed, their follow count, their engagement metrics. They asked if you thought their content was good, if their aesthetic was cohesive. You looked at this elaborate performance of self they'd built and had absolutely no framework for evaluation. Not because you're out of touch, but because you've never had to think of your own existence as requiring curation and optimization for public consumption. This wasn't judgment, it was freedom from performance pressure. You learned to exist without constantly managing others' perception of you. Without an audience to maintain, you never developed the exhausting habit of treating your own life as content requiring strategic planning and optimization. Psychologists call this reduced self-monitoring, lower preoccupation with how others perceive you. But for you, it was just being yourself. Here's what's remarkable. You maintained an unperformed self, a version of you that exists independent of audience reception. Today's teens spend hours managing their digital presence, experiencing genuine stress over engagement rates and follower counts. They treat their own lives as brands requiring constant maintenance, but you just exist. This wasn't ignorance, it was psychological freedom. Picture this. You create something you're proud of. Maybe it's a piece of writing, maybe art, maybe a small business venture. You share it with the people in your immediate life. 5 people see it, 10 people see it, maybe 50 if you share it on your Facebook page. That's it. No explosion of attention, no viral moment, no sudden recognition. You process this reality in about 30 seconds and move on with your day, continuing to work on the thing because you care about the thing itself, not the attention it generates. This wasn't acceptance of failure. It was realistic expectation. You learn that most good work reaches small audiences, and that's perfectly fine. Without the lottery-like possibility of virality shaping your creative efforts, you maintained the ability to do meaningful work for modest returns. Psychologists call this calibrated risk assessment, realistic evaluation of probable outcomes. But for you, it was just adulthood. Here's what's extraordinary. You can invest effort in projects without needing the possibility of massive attention to motivate you. Young creators today increasingly see their work through the viral or failure binary. They create specifically for algorithm optimization rather than quality, but you make things to make them. This wasn't lack of ambition, it was sustainable creation. Picture this. You need to make a decision about something significant. Maybe what to buy, where to travel, how to decorate your space, what to eat. You think about what you actually want. You maybe ask a friend with relevant experience. You might read some articles or reviews. But it doesn't occur to you to find an influencer's take on the subject. You don't seek out someone with a parasocial relationship to millions to tell you what choice to make. You gather information, you think it through, and you decide based on your own values and preferences. This wasn't stubbornness, it was decision-making autonomy. You learn to make choices based on your own judgment, rather than outsourcing taste and decision-making to curated personalities. Without influencers mediating your relationship to products, experiences, and choices, you maintain direct connection to your own preferences. Psychologists call this internal locus of control paired with social intelligence. But for you, it was just shopping. Here's what's remarkable. You know what you actually like, rather than what you've been algorithmically nudged toward. Gen Z makes purchase decisions heavily influenced by creator recommendations. They trust influencers more than traditional advertising or even friends. But you trust yourself. This wasn't isolation, it was self-knowledge. Picture this. Someone makes a reference you don't understand. They mention a trend, a sound, a creator, a moment from TikTok. Everyone else in the conversation laughs or nods knowingly. You have no idea what they're talking about. And instead of scrambling to catch up, instead of nodding along pretending, instead of making a mental note to research it later, you just say you don't know what that is. There's a brief pause. Someone explains. Life continues. And you feel something unexpected, not embarrassment, but a quiet satisfaction that your attention has been elsewhere, invested in things you actually chose. This wasn't pride in ignorance. It was peace with selective attention. You learned that you don't need to understand every reference to be a complete, relevant, valuable person. That admission of not knowing became a form of honesty, even a small act of resistance against the pressure to perform omniscient cultural fluency. Psychologists call this secure identity, self-worth that doesn't depend on staying current with every trend. But for you, it was just confidence. Here's what's extraordinary. You measure your relevance by your actual relationships and contributions, not by your fluency in viral moments. Young people today fake knowledge of trends to avoid social penalty. They pretend recognition to maintain standing. But you're comfortable saying you don't know. This wasn't contrarianism, it was authenticity. But some experiences cut deeper. Consider the first time you watched someone you care about spiral into genuine distress over their social media performance. Maybe it was your daughter crying over follower counts. Maybe it was a friend obsessing over why their video didn't perform. Maybe it was a young colleague having a full anxiety attack because they'd been offline for a weekend and missed participating in a trending moment. You watch someone you love experience real psychological pain over something that to you barely registers as real. You tried to comfort them, to offer perspective, but you realized your reassurance meant nothing because you couldn't understand the stakes they were experiencing. This imprinted a profound recognition. Your disconnection from this system isn't just preference, it's protection. But that protection existed alongside something darker. You also realized you can't fully connect with huge portions of younger generations. Their reality is shaped by forces you don't experience. Their social dynamics operate on platforms you don't understand. Your ability to mentor, to relate, to offer relevant guidance is limited by this fundamental divide. You're watching a generation develop under completely different psychological pressures than you experienced, and you're sometimes powerless to help them navigate it. This created people who hold both truths, gratitude for their own distance from algorithmic life and awareness that this distance creates its own form of isolation. Relief at escaping these systems and concern for those still in them. This complexity might be their most valuable inheritance. Let's return to that coffee shop, that moment of overhearing a conversation full of references you don't understand. You're sitting there, coffee in hand, book open, mind quiet. The baristas are laughing about someone's latest drama, someone you'll never hear of. You're completely outside that universe, and you're okay, more than okay. You're present in your actual life, your attention is your own, your sense of self isn't mediated through engagement metrics. These people carry something the modern world desperately needs. They remember what it feels like to be bored without reaching for stimulation. They remember making choices based on their own preferences rather than algorithmic suggestions. They remember experiencing moments without documenting them. They remember being unknown and being fine with that. They're living proof that resilience is built, not born. That competence comes from practice, not protection. that the best gift isn't a smooth path or constant validation, but the ability to exist comfortably in your own mind without external stimulation. In a world of fractured attention, performance anxiety, and parasocial relationships with strangers, they stand as evidence of another way. Not perfect, not without costs, but a way that produced people who can sit with their own thoughts, who can make decisions without influence or guidance, who can experience life without performing it, who can tolerate being outside the cultural mainstream without crisis. They grew up before virality became the measure of worth, before attention became the currency of existence, before every private moment demanded public documentation. And somehow, they learned to hold it all: connection without constant performance, awareness without algorithmic dependence, presence without documentation. They're not famous to millions, but they're fully themselves to the people who actually know them. And that might be the most radical achievement of all.